Hi, hello everyone, and happy Friday. Thanks for joining us for another exciting AdvisorShares AlphaNooner. Today, we've got Noah Hamman back here to wrap up the week. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking thematics, but some special time, of course, focusing in on the world of cannabis. If you have any questions, as always, you're welcome to throw them in the chat as we go along. I know we have a lot to cover. We'll try to, spend some good time here and there. We might even have time at the end to cover the egregious Cracker Barrel rebrand. We'll see on the restaurant side, but we'll try to keep it on those tight themes. So good reminder if you're out there, ask those questions. If you have them, you can always drop them in the chat. And then, of course, if you have any comments, also welcome to put them in there. And if you're feeling like giving us a like, always love to see it. I think it helps to connect the numbers. It's kind of fun to see the numbers, on the screen here, but that kind of helps as well. So with all that said, thanks for joining us, Noah. Happy
Sure.
Friday. How's it
Yep.
going? I think we were just talking a little bit in the, I know we'll get into cannabis and everything else as well, but just kind of talking about the general market. Jackson Hole, everyone's getting all hyped up. It feels like very Super Bowl-esque for, finance people in general. Seems positive. Seems like some good moves. Seems like
Market loves
maybe
it.
market's eating it up, which is great. I feel like a little surprised. I don't know if I just haven't been following it as closely, just because I think, again, with the revisions we've seen on some of the numbers, I was a little bit hesitant to see if we did get any kind of cuts coming, but does seem like that's maybe the way that we're heading. And luckily, I think some good impacts for, again, some of the themes that we focus on. So, and the market potentially generally as well. Any specific thoughts or any sort of high level quick temp check on that side of things?
No, I mean, I think I'm with you, right? I think there was, a quarter or two ago where it would have made sense to me to lower rates, and it felt very weird that it wasn't lowered,
Mhm.
given the data that we were seeing. But I also, and I think we've talked about this here before, I think a lot of the issues around tariffs was, well managed by multinational companies, or companies at least that manufacture a lot of their products overseas and then bring them in for sale here. And that strategy and that approach, I think, is run out in very different, various different categories. And so now they're shipping more goods in, right? They didn't try to ship them in before the presidency started and put them in storage, then sell them at still whatever the prices people were used to. Now we are starting to see, some of these things impact. And it's going to do one or the other, right? It's either going to push prices up for consumers, or companies will eat some of that, and then that'll have an impact on their margins and things like that. But I think net, it's good for the stock market if the rates are going to go down. But I'm with you. The numbers actually are starting to look in a way that I'm not sure that it entirely makes sense, but we'll see how it goes.
But I think ultimately, I think for a lot of the sort of more rate sensitive areas, I know a lot of microcap thinking about psychedelics as well. I feel like that's an interesting kind of element. Again, how it plays out long term, if it's the right choice, it's always hard to tell. You kind of get to tell like 3 years on, I think, for most of these things. But in the short term, I think, kind of a friendly environment on that front. So that's great. Also, hey, Lance, great to see you in the comments. Skip see you in the comments as well.
Lance is the only
Um,
one there. Dang
I think
it.
it was early. It
I
was
thought
very
people wanted to get answers.
well. They can. All right. Well, we
Nah,
can
it's
talk about
it's
this.
easier to make up your own answers.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, I mean, again, I don't think there's any surprises. We can talk about sort of, the cannabis landscape as it is. I think it is one of those things whenever there is really, really good news or there's no news, I think a lot of that space gets filled with, a lot of different voices. And I think that's fine. We've talked about it.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is important to obviously try to correct, I think, where you're seeing misinformation. Obviously, I think you do a good job of kind of being out there and trying to communicate with
I
people.
pay you to say that, though.
Well,
Technically, the people that I don't pay give me different feedback.
Well, they have anonymous accounts, maybe, who knows? But, yeah, or don't, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, so but I don't know. I think it's nothing new, so no surprises there, but do wanna spend some time. I know you've also done, you know, you're on with the Dales report guys, which is great. I think, good to kind of chat through what's going on there. But are there questions that you're commonly seeing again and again? Anything different? Anything that you think
I feel like it's mostly about swaps, right? I saw Guap had a nice post, by the way. People should make sure you follow him and read his post. Um, but yeah, it just seems to be about swaps, right? So there's a misconception, which I get, and I think it's always helpful to clarify. So I always don't mind clarifying, right? As long as I sort of understand what the question is. Um, of this sort of notion that a swap provider can force us to sell. That's probably one of the first places to start. Not true.
sure.
They can't force us to sell, right? There's only a handful of people that probably can force us to sell, right? Compliance can.
Mhm.
Yes, the SEC could. They had never have done that to us, but if the SEC knocks on your door and says you have to sell all that, you're going to sell.
Mhm.
And at least in particular, as it relates to dealing with stuff like cannabis stocks, I mean, keep in mind the custodian, right, could say, hey, this stock has changed, right? I'll make up a scenario. Village Farms buys a plant touching company in the US, as opposed to just being ready for plant touching, which, they look very posed and ready.
Mhm.
Um, BNY could easily come in and say, hey, you got to find a swap provider. You got to get this out. We're going to get in trouble by having this in here. So they
Mhm.
absolutely can tap us on the shoulder. I think in that instance, it isn't quite so you got to sell today, because there's an agreement that we have between the bank and us. And so they've still got to tend to that agreement. And that agreement doesn't really allow them to, and I guess maybe that's the interesting point. The agreement doesn't actually allow them to force us to sell, but certainly gives them the option to terminate the custody agreement, which keep in mind, we've already seen in this industry, right? When MJ flipped from, it was a Latin American REIT fund, I
Great.
think,
Yeah.
right? And then it
Yep.
flipped into the cannabis strategy. From what I understand, could be wrong. So if I'm wrong, I apologize. But from what I understand, right, their original bank, US Bank Corp, said this isn't good. And then eventually and so they didn't close the fund down. They didn't force them to sell everything, but you saw over time they moved their custody to a broker dealer, Wedbush. Wedbush is comfortable holding those stocks, and we've seen other broker dealers comfortable holding those stocks. Um, and that's how they were able to find, I think sort of a happy medium too, because I think they were just enlisted stuff anyways. But at the
Mhm.
time, the bank had no policy around cannabis related companies, even in another territory. And so they were, I'll use the phrase forced, right? Meaning we're going to terminate this agreement. We'll give you some time to get your house in order, but you can't do that here. So can they force them to sell a stock? No. Can they terminate the agreement? Yes. And I would say that's actually similar to what a swap arrangement is, right? It's an agreement. It's a pretty thick agreement that speaks to all the terms and conditions. And nowhere in, at least our swap agreements, and I think anybody else's typically, you would see that they have the ability to tell you to sell. With that being said, they can run into issues, and we've talked about it, right? So hopefully, again, full transparency. We've been pretty clear that to say that swap providers can have their own capacity challenges based on percentages of ownerships, and then in particular based on balance sheet. In fact, I think on the Dales report, I talked about how the relationships we have with our swap providers, I would describe one as really big, medium, and small, right? So their balance sheets are very different, and their compliance environments are very different, and their willingness to be a bit more aggressive with things, maybe in terms of stuff like percentage holdings, are different from the different firms. But they certainly don't have the ability to tap Dan on the shoulder and say, "You have to sell this stock." They can call them and say, "Hey, we've got these challenges here, and maybe there's something we can do to resolve these challenges." And what Dan's going to do is think about what he wants to do with the portfolio. He's going to think about what he's allowed to do from a prospectus perspective, and he's really going to think about what he can do, what he's allowed to do, what he should do. That really drives what we ultimately want to drive, which is to be the best performing cannabis ETF out there. And as long as if they've got a need. And we feel like we can accommodate that need. I think that's great and fantastic as long as it's with shareholders in mind first, not what people on X think, is best for shareholders in mind, but what for the people who have responsibility for that product and for the shareholders in it think. So, it's always good again to see what everybody thinks, but most of the time, I don't want to say most of the time it's wrong. I would say they don't understand the dynamics and the complexities of all the different parts and pieces. And if they did, they might have a different answer, right? Sitting in our shoes. And so that's the thing, I guess, to just address that point in particular, right? Can swap providers force you to sell? Nope. Can swap providers terminate their agreement? Oh, yes. Have we ever had a swap provider terminate their agreement with us? Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Like
sucked.
that. Yeah.
When Cowan went out of it, when Cowan was purchased by TD, some of the old schoolers that are on here will remember. Holy, I was about to curse,
How?
but holy s, yeah, holy
Yeah.
cow! It was a scramble, right? And again, relative to disclosure, people ask like, "Where's all this disclosed?" Well, those are easily people who have not read the prospectus and the SAI. Read those things, I guess. Well, actually, I shouldn't say I guess. You should read those things,
Ew.
right? That's
Yeah.
what my compliance officer would tell me to tell you. Read them. They're long. They have tons of disclosure, but if you really want to know the inner workings of any product, those are usually the two best documents to go to. And you'll see it's littered with all this stuff about swaps, right?
I
So
will
I'm
say,
not
even
worried
though
about
they
this.
are long, I feel like read through them. I know a lot of people are probably tempted to take them and like grokify them or something like that, which I know can
Yeah,
help
don't
in
do
some ways,
that.
but try to read through,
Uh,
whatever.
yeah.
It's something.
Yep. I'd rely on a trusted advisor if you don't want to read it yourself. And
Sure.
for me, that's how I learned a lot of the inner workings of the business. When you read in great detail how they do different things and the disclosure of different things and all the different things that can happen, it made me in my early career really understand how these products work. So, again, summarizing, software providers can't make us sell. They can terminate their agreement with us. We've had one terminate their agreement with us again, but due to their buyout, not do anything that we did nefarious or whatever, but they were bought out by TD and they just didn't want to be in that business anymore. And then as it relates to things like disclosure, that's where you're going to find all your disclosure, right? You don't find all that disclosure in the marketing material. McKinsey, I don't shame on
Uh,
you for not,
we have
making
some
our
disclosure,
website.
appropriate disclosure, and I think they all say read the prospectus. So
And it's
whatever.
right there on the website, right? So I get it. So for those that are crying about disclosure, and again, I know it's the small vocal minority, but for more sane people, I want them to be able to hear it from me. That's where you'll find the information.
Wait,
So what
while
else?
you're
It
giving your thought,
was
I
yeah.
will say also, 'cause I think we talk about it all the time, but just for people to know exactly where it is. So if you're on any of the ETFs, if you just go to the bottom, there's a
Mhm.
section that has all of the information there.
Yes.
It has, the prospectus, SAI. Sometimes it has more information if something has a fulcrum fee, summary prospectus, all those things. So I would definitely recommend it's in sort of the fund document section. So just making sure you
Yep.
have that. It's all on the website,
Yeah.
but
So yeah, so and I think I said this on the Dales report, like, we are constantly dealing with this. It is the
Mhm.
absolute hardest product to manage. Um, the parts and the pieces, the changing views, the, can't custody, maybe could, this company, maybe not that company, now
Mhm.
TSX, the swap movement, the collateral movement. It is the absolute hardest product to manage. Um, and so again, we deal with this stuff every single day. We deal with plot providers saying we're out. We've done that at a high level, right? We've dealt with balance sheet issues. We've dealt with capacity issues. And again, people want to see capacity as an on or off switch. It's not. It's not an on or off switch with these guys, right? There could be a day where they're like, we can't take any more of this position. Okay, that's fine. I'll figure out something that works for the investment strategy and I'll buy something else, right? I don't have to buy that position. I have a lot of stocks that move for the most part in the same way. So I can still carry out my objective for the prospectus, right? That's what really matters to me the most. If I'm going to get in trouble, it's for doing something that the prospectus says I can't do or doesn't say I can do, I guess. Um, and so it happens all the time. And so it's not an on and off switch. And you work through those things. And there's been some real creative solutions, right? We've helped, think I was holding back on sharing some of this information with Dale's because we have competitors out there.
Sure.
Um, and I
Feel
don't
free to
want
do
to
this
give them,
yourselves.
yeah, I don't want to give them a leg up, but we've helped swap providers address some of their balance sheet issues. I'll leave it at that. Um, and so again, all these things ebb and flow. So if I tell you that I have a swap capacity, and it depends on what swap provider you're talking about too. But if I tell you I have a swap capacity on something on a particular day, it could be gone tomorrow, or it could be back again, right? So we're not going to sit around saying I got to do this, I got to do that, or I heard this, and then it changes. So it's disclosed that liquidity is a challenge with swaps.
Mhm.
I was actually looking at the prospectus again just recently. It's in there a ton of times. We've talked about it in these what I'll call educational or marketing events. And so, yeah, it's just a function of working with swaps. I even use the example of S&P 500. There, you can get to a size that your swap provider will, for the most liquid security out there, will say, I can't do that, or I can't do that today, right? I might be able to do that over the course of a week. And in particular, what we run into, and this is the issue we probably run into, and it's not an issue, this is the whatever thing we run
Challenge.
into the most. And I would run into it even if I didn't have a swap provider. But keep in mind too, there's only so much liquidity at a certain price out there as well. So
Mhm.
not counting the inflows and the outflows aspects of things, just because I want a certain stock, and for me, I want it at a certain price. I don't want it at whatever price you can get it, right? If you throw in a market order on these cannabis stocks, good luck. Um, but so even that from that aspect, right? We're willing to sell some at a certain price. We might be willing to take some at a certain price, and they can do what they can do. And if they can't do the rest, then I don't get filled, right? It's as simple as that. So it's every day. It changes. It's incredibly hard. I can't wait until we're done with the swaps. And now, when I say that, I'm not sure that we're ever going to be done with the swaps to a certain extent. And I forgot where I gave that example, but just trying to give people the example of leveraged Tesla ETF, right? If you look at the cover, under the cover of what they're holding, it's swaps. So why do you need swaps with the most liquid security on the planet? Diversification rules, right? I think the same thing actually with one of our competitor ETFs that holds 6 positions. They'll never be out of swaps with that approach. They'll never be out of swaps.
Mhm.
And even with us, which we take a more diversified approach, right? Like the other third U.S. approach, that
Mhm.
helps us balance out our diversification tests and obligations and things like that. And that will help us not have to have at least a significant part of the portfolio be swaps. But just given the fact that in this industry, right, you've got sort of, three bigs, bunch of mids, and then some smalls. And I mean mid as in mid-size, not how the kids mean mid today.
Uh,
Um,
Not
and
Sydney Sweeney or whatever. People are making up insane things. Yeah, whatever.
I have to say that as I'm traveling with my kids, over the last few days. But
That's great.
Um, so we take a more diversified approach. That's going to help us on the diversification stuff, but we'll never actually entirely in this product unless the landscape changes, right? If 20 companies come in and they're big and running in the space and all of that, well, that's awesome, right? That'll give us more things to choose from. I don't think that's what's going to happen, right? In fact, I think what's going to happen is that real challenge of what you see in today's investing strategy, where you see what's a good example? AI, right? An AI strategy. Well, what's one of their top holdings going to be?
Mhm.
Google. Well, how does Google make most of their money?
Mhm.
Search, advertising, right? They're a media company.
Mhm.
Not entirely, but hopefully you get my point.
Mhm.
How much of it is AI? How much money are they making on AI? Pour through the financials, but it's not a pure play AI. So do I expect to see that in the cannabis space? Sure, right? You're going to see was that a sneeze? What's going on over there? Is that a multiple sneeze?
Ah! Yeah, sorry. That
Right?
was such a good
Right.
point. Ah, okay. That was so good. No, that's true. I think we've talked about that in the psychedelic space too. I know, like Johnson and
Yeah, yeah,
Johnson,
yeah.
would you put it
Right.
in? But it does have some
Yeah.
exposure. But yeah, not a
So we'll
ton.
see that too. But so I don't expect that all of that alleviates the swap stuff, and it might even be time to look at some of the comments and questions. But
Yes.
yeah, I hope that helps a little bit. We run into challenges all the time. We overcome those challenges. We continue to invest per the investment strategy. I know people are looking at the cash. Well, actually, maybe pause before I get into the
Yeah.
cash.
We can get into
You
the
want
cash.
to hit questions or
Yeah. Let's get
clarify
into.
anything or?
I don't think clarifying anything that you talked about just yet. I feel like there was one thing that I wanted to add to, but I will remember it.
Did you
What
lose it
was
in
it?
the sneeze?
I might have lost it. It might have sneezed out the idea. I don't know what it is, but I'll think about it. Dang it, what was it related to? I don't know. I think it was about the diversified approach in terms of some of the names that are doing well. Something
Lance
like that.
blessed you.
Thank you so much, Lance. I appreciate it.
That's awesome.
Okay, let me see. Okay, so I feel like a lot of this you talked about. I see Lance's question about being maxed out on positions. It sounds like
Where
again
is
it.
it?
Let me see.
Well, I say, where is it? I've got to
Click
scroll
on it.
myself. I'm a dumb. I was thinking you were
No,
controlling the
I was
scroll of
gonna
it.
click on it. No, no, no. I can.
So yeah. The answer is sometimes you do. Yeah, sometimes you do get, and you get maxed out because of, I would say, two reasons. Well, you can get maxed out in an individual position based on the swap provider's whatever compliance level of comfort of how much they own of a particular company, or again, sometimes you can run into balance sheet and credit issues depending on what you're looking to do and how much you're looking to buy. Even if we can get it executed at the price that we want to get it executed at, right? Sometimes the limitations come from the limits we put on it. We want X amount of shares, but we want to pay no more than X relative to the value of the swap, right? Because it actually walks and talks like a regular trade for us. It's just in a swap. And so that's more us putting limitations on what we're willing to do for something like that. So yeah.
That's good. Okay, so Brad had another question, sort of talking about managing swap capacity, all those things, and
Hmm.
if we do see a lot more inflows coming in, basically,
Yeah.
is that an issue? How would you manage that? Again, that would be, I think, a good problem to have.
Right. The answer is it can be an issue on certain positions, right? But is it an issue in terms of other things that I can invest in that easily fit within the investment strategy? No. So if Dan wanted to put the cash to work today, he might be limited in one or two different stocks, again, on any given day. Um, but he's not limited in terms of, finding stocks that fit the investment prospectus, fit the investment strategy, and, for being honest, correlate very closely and provide almost the same return stream. So again, Dan will scrutinize that because we are, well, what's the right word? We want to win, right? So, and winning for us means, and people always hate this, I know, but winning for us means beating the competitors. It doesn't mean beating the S&P 500. I can't really control that, but we can control if we can beat our competitors. So that's the scoreboard we look at. We're not a tactical fund. Dan's not going all to cash. I know people have suggested that we've burned up capital by not invoking active management. We've explained a zillion times active management for us is stock selection and cash a little bit, right? But we're not going to zero. You couldn't do that in this space, quite frankly, even if you wanted to, which is why we never built the product that way. That's why if you read the prospectus, it will say, it'll say temporary defensive positions, but it doesn't say tactical asset allocation.
Yeah, no, I think that answers it perfectly. Okay,
Oh,
Bruce.
and just to answer that, and I think I said on the Dales report, fingers crossed, more swap
Yeah.
dividers coming. One super close. One looks good. We'll see. And the
Okay.
one that's super close, healthy capacity.
Okay, that's all.
And,
I think.
and I should say also working on the capacity issues for one that we already have an existing relationship with.
So just continuing to expand in those again by having those
Right.
good relationships, being able to trust to be able to expand out capacity is great.
Yeah.
I think that's good. I think that's something that has been managed. You, Dan, and everyone have kind of managed as things
It's
have gotten.
mostly Dan. I can't take any credit. It's
Yeah.
Dan.
Okay, fair enough. But in terms of managing, I think when things are tougher, making sure things go smoothly, also planning and accounting for when things get better, how to manage that and get that done in the smoothest way possible. It is a lot of work.
Yeah.
It takes time,
We've
but
mostly allocated responsibilities as follows. You're in charge of being nice and people being kind to you. Dan's in charge of doing all the hard work on the back end, and I'm in charge of just getting kicked in the nuts every day on Twitter.
you got to specialize, I guess. Who knows? No, you do a good job. And so does Dan, of course. Okay. Bruce has a good question, a little more in
Right.
depth. So it's good. Let me see if I can read through it. Looks like your high water collateral, aka notional Nomura, is 918 million versus 237 million today. Is there any reason to think that their appetite has changed, or is it a good proxy for capacity? I realize notional isn't the only limiter. Good question,
It
Bruce.
is difficult for me to answer that question quite so specifically. Let me think about how I would answer this question. I think I'd answer it by saying it's changing with Nomura in a good way. And can I say this? It's changing with Nomura, and they're helping us with the other swap providers. And I already alluded to that already a second ago. But yeah, I think that's
Okay.
a good assessment.
Okay, that sounds good.
And thanks for being on, Bruce. And thanks for
Yes.
all the education you post out there. I really appreciate it. You have a very straightforward approach. For everyone else, if you're not following Bruce, you definitely should. And this is I know X and Twitter is all crazy sometimes, but I'll
Okay.
tell you, this is the absolute benefit of X is you can follow a guy like this, and for free, he's giving you his decades worth of experience and knowledge. Take advantage of that as much as you can. So give him a follow.
Yes, that is solid. Again, also, I just always want to shout out Jungle Java as well, just because again, I know she's
Oh yeah,
also
and buy her
working a ton.
coffee for love of God.
Please for the
And
Java,
I'm talking to you, Ben. Quit dragging trolls into Jane's feed. One, give her a follow because I don't think he follows her, and then buy her some coffee. What?
Okay. Okay, moving on. Here we go.
Call his parents or something. He can call his parents, right, to afford it.
To fund it. She deserves. She works a
Frustrating.
lot, and thank you very much. Works a lot. Skip, great question. I think that would be a crazy thing to do right this
This
second
was the
in my
university to
mind.
space.
Would you suppose? Yeah, it was sorry. For anyone who's listening and doing something else while they're watching, it's do you suppose that inverse ETFs in the space could materialize? Unlikely. Question.
I think so. And here's my thoughts on this. And I think we've talked about this in the past. So one, keep in mind, inverse and leverage in multiple versions have existed in the past. ETFMG, before they sold out to Amplify, had a long, leverage short. I think Horizons for a while, and then someone for a while had an ETP, right? So it was an exchange or ETN, exchange traded note or exchange traded product, whatever you want to call it. That was also, I don't know if it was lever or inverse levered, but definitely long levered. All of them have closed, right? I don't know why there wasn't the demand for them at the time because there's been so much volatility in the cannabis space, right? That's not new. And that's what vol traders look for, right? So they'll trade options, of course, but if you can give them a levered product, right, they'll trade the crap out of that thing. And so, but they never took off. They all closed. And then for us, I just felt like the space was, I did feel like the space was sort of too fragile to have a product like that over time. And when we thought, we had we had good news coming,
Yeah.
thanks, Biden or whoever else, Ann Milgram or whatever. But when we thought it would be the right time for something like that and to bring in traders and to bring in that liquidity, and Bruce talks about that all the time,
Mhm.
um, we built it. And then we purposely didn't build the offsetting one, which now in hindsight, to be honest with you, it'd have been way easier to build both. And then I would have just try to move that flow, back and forth. Um, so probably maybe a mistake in hindsight not to have built that. But the purpose of it was I didn't want to build something easy to push those prices down. And I get it. You can short them. Oh, I almost said a ticker, right? Have we
Oh,
said tickers already or not?
you have not.
Okay, so I'll try to avoid it so we don't have to pull this. So you can short any ETF. I get it. So you can take a bearish position. I get that you can also take a bearish position on the levered long version. Um, but we didn't want to build one that you could just put $1 in and crush these stocks.
Yeah.
That's just it's a non-capitalist view, let's just say, right? We
I
we
I
wanted to
was
do
gonna
some
I was gonna say it does seem not surprising, but I think, yeah, it would have benefited. I know there's a lot of talk about like benefiting just the company sort of thing, but it was sort of born to hold back on that to try to support the space and try to support the stocks. Whatever. That's fine.
Right. And the
Um,
people calling for the closure of the leverage ones are the people that don't want to see active traders come in the space. They're the ones that don't want to see more liquidity come into the space. And why do they want that? I don't know. But I do know in the absence of a big crowd of flow, it's
Mhm.
easier to take advantage of things. Is that their goal? I don't know. But what you want is cannabis to be like S&P 500. You don't want it going backwards. You certainly don't want it staying where it is, though. For those who, on the internet at least claim to be making all this money, maybe they're enjoying it. But that was the rationale for it. I don't even know if we answered this question of would an inverse ever show up? I think so. I think it's just a natural thing, right? Look at all these other themes and asset classes, and you see both. Will it be us? I don't know. No plans right now. But I think you should expect to see it if you expect to see this investment category normalize.
I was gonna say perversely, I think you do want to have one eventually because it means
I
the
know it
it's
means you're more
stable,
normal.
matured.
Yeah,
Yeah, all those things I think make sense. Also,
absolutely.
yes, Skip, I do agree. I think it would be kind of unpopular right now, although again, maybe people
Are
would
you
use it
kidding?
to balance. I mean, people might use it, but I think people who want to support the space and see things
Right,
change in the short term would be like, that's a bit of a crazy move. But in
right.
the longer term, you're right. I don't know. I mean, I think you'd have to look back with the hindsight in a month or something, or in whatever amount of time. Looking back, you'd be able to say that was crazy or not crazy. Because yeah, it feels like things are
Right.
gonna
Well, and
move
there's
faster
and there's
volatile.
still a whole thing of just the capitalism side of it. You got to make money off of it, right? And so I will say the good decision on our part was the timing of the levered version, right? And I think
Mhm.
at one point we were around 100 million, a little over it. You're profitable at that level, right? I
Yeah.
like that. That helps you, right? Does it
Yeah,
help
it does.
you? Look at that
Thank you.
smile
Yeah,
on your face.
that is true. I appreciate it.
Um, and then obviously things, timing wise was very poor. And then it got to the point where the product was not profitable for us and up until a very recent time frame.
Mhm.
And as we know, because the chief executive Nepo baby was asking for us to close that fund down because it's not unprofitable. Somehow he was magically worried about our profitability as a firm. Fast forward to today, profitable. Hopefully it
Yes.
stays that way. Hopefully
Fingers crossed.
to the rocket emoji.
Do not say rocket emoji. We've recently gotten some feedback on
No,
emoji
I
use,
tweeted
which
it.
is I know you have. Yeah, it's hard out there. I get it. I think they're supposed to be just fun, but I get how people can interpret them. But
Dude, I don't mean
you
to
wanna
dude you, but I've been living with this for so long. I remember when
I
I worked at Fidelity and we were building software that you would put on a floppy disk. Anyone know what a floppy disk is?
yeah.
And it was called Fox, Fidelity Online Express, by the way.
Mhm.
So shout out to anybody from Fidelity that's watching and remembers that old software.
That's
And it was the same thing. We had this little chart, the Fidelity logo and stuff on it, and the chart did this, and like, chart's got to go down, up. And I'm
and
like,
then, yeah,
oh.
it's
And then
true.
I think one time there's like a loose, translucent currency. It was 100 too much. 5 or $1 is okay.
Really? a
This
hundred dollars?
industry,
No, it's a little
right?
crazy. I know.
Right. This industry's nuts sometimes, right? So swap and all the other stuff we're talking about aside, I mean, just marketing products and
Yeah.
but as much as I complain, we can do stuff like this now. We can talk about things and educate, and it not be deemed, sales and marketing material until I blurt out a ticker, which I'm going to try to avoid.
Mhm.
Um, so I appreciate the flexibility the regulators have given us, but sometimes, it's a beating.
I think it's funny on some of the small emoji things. I think it is important, like you're saying, to be able to communicate and educate and try to have, yeah, direct communication. I think only hopefully can make things better and give you more information. All right, let me see. Seeing through some
More
things
questions, more
here,
questions.
more questions. Interesting. Seeing some comments on the global side of cannabis, which I know we've been so focused in on the US side. Obviously, I think that's where all the activity is recently, but yeah, we've definitely seen some interesting stuff on the international side. I know we've talked with um, Margaret Brody. We recently had that interview with High Tide, which was super interesting. So yeah, a lot of interesting stuff on the international side as well going on. Again, it feels like cannabis is kind of turning a corner globally. It feels like it's kind of all moving,
And that's been, still negative, but if you're going to be in cannabis, that's been the place to be, right? The
yeah,
global strategies have outperformed the US version. So for the most part, across the board from every provider.
yeah, that's true. Disappointing, but again, maybe it's a diversification versus concentration element. Diversification a
And
little
I
bit.
think, again, Bruce and others talk about this, the liquidity around it, right? A regular listing just helps. So for most people, if you're acting on a headline, right? Because everyone said, why is Tilray taking off on the Trump news? Now, I do think Tilray benefits somewhat, with a change to Schedule 3, but in part it benefits because it's US listed and it's liquid and or liquid enough, and
You
so
can
it's going to
access.
react. And that's why I have the attitude of, all right, so maybe I can't or won't or can't buy a position today. I can buy another one if I want.
Mhm.
And it's going to move, maybe less, maybe more, maybe the same, but in the range. So in the whole scheme of things, not too worried about it, right? If we wanted to put that cash to work today, we could.
Okay, that's fair one. All right, this is a good,
Just maybe not
interesting.
where you want us to put it to work, but we could put it to work.
I feel like it's almost like everyone having their own football team. I know probably
I
it's
know. It's
also
awesome,
being
right?
invested, but everyone is like rah 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 for their team, which I get it. But I think there are a lot of different, yeah,
Well,
good players.
even Guap said that in his post. Like, would I allocate the portfolio the way Dan's allocated? No, I know. Well,
Yeah,
that's what makes all this awesome. It's fun.
yeah, and you can build your own tech. I mean, it's again slightly less efficient with the current
Oh
setup,
yeah,
but
right.
still
That's the
good.
funny thing too. I hear that a lot. Like, don't buy, any ETF or whatever. Buy the underlying. Yeah, buy the
Sure.
underlying. Go nuts. It's awesome. Make
Yeah,
those decisions yourself. See how hard they are, and then imagine doing that for a gigantic pool of capital. It's stressful. And then imagine doing it for a gigantic pool of capital, and then managing all the operational stuff and the money movement and the margin and the regulatory stuff. Like, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard. It's also fun. And it's, as you said, it just makes it more like sports, and everyone's got their team they're rooting for, and until they start calling you names, it's all fun. But even when they
yeah.
call you names, it's not the worst. They
That
do that at sporting
I was
venues
going
too,
to say
right?
that is exactly part of sports too. I feel like as long as you're like pulling for the NFL itself, you can also pull for the individual teams, but I don't think you can be against the NFL, but pro a
Right,
specific
right.
team. So whatever, who knows?
That's true.
All right. So kind of Lance is tying back in on, so thinking about summarizing what he's hearing is that uh capacity has been, or positions have been, let me pull this up.
It's off and on, and since inception, right? Since
Sorry.
I'm sure there were issues before Cowan, but yeah, we've constantly dealt with issues
That
and
is
just
fair.
continue to manage them, right?
That's what I mean.
And
Yeah, life is
And for a
constant.
period of time, I think, we might be lagging one of our competitors. At least last I checked, I used to brag a lot how we were the best performing one. But I think in the last gap of 3 or 4 months, we've lagged a little bit, not dramatically, but a little bit. So that part's been challenging because that's again what we care about. We want to be the best performing option that you have, and
That, but
hopefully we
also
can
easy to
deliver.
access. I think the liquidity element, I know we talk about all the
Yeah.
time, and that is an important
Well, that
part.
was the post I posted this morning about be careful. I get it. You're going to look at other products and consider using them, but they have their challenges, and we have similar challenges with our own small products, right? We have small ETFs. They have wide spreads. They can close at weird prices, not close to their NAV, but not because they're at a premium or a big discount, but because they might have not traded in the last 15 minutes of the day, right? The market moved, and then when it opens up the next day, the performance looks weird. So it's tough with small ETFs. We know we're a small ETF shop.
Sure.
But when you look at those three, and especially in a frenzied day like yesterday, I knew as I saw the closing prices and
You're
how
like,
each of the ETFs were performing, I was like, I want to look at premiums and discounts and see what I see. And so checking it this morning, I'm like, yep, people are getting hosed on their execution prices.
I was gonna say I wouldn't be surprised if you put in your calendar Outlook, like be on Twitter for like 15 minutes of the yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But
And
it's
so,
your
but
perspective.
we are lucky, right? We're lucky to have the biggest one with the highest AUM that helps keep those spreads nice and tight.
Mhm.
And so one spreads is one thing, right? Premium and discount is another. If you're buying 10 and 15 cents over it, now it's a volatile space. Can you make that up in a day? Of course you can. So don't sweat it too much. But just know, those are aspects of what you should think about when you're making that decision. Even something like CNBS, I'd be careful because they have a lot of money from their global compatriot, right? Pair partner.
Mhm.
And again, this is where sometimes I do get frustrated, right? Like Dan was getting killed, or having, I don't know, somewhere between 38 and 45% exposure of the US in the
Oh,
global.
sure.
And while the competitor out there had more like 50, and I think I looked last night, and now it's up to like 55, which is fine. It's all great. It's all good. But the difference is in their situation, the global fund holds 95% of the AUM. And at some point when you don't need to do that, as soon as we get custody, we're not going to do that. We're going to get it sort of what I'd consider normal. But for now, it's way better for those shareholders to do it all in kind and to be more tax efficient. So there's a real advantage of doing it.
Mhm.
But then once I can custody, I can get that tax efficiency at an individual security level. So when that AUM flips out, if it flips out, maybe they'll keep it there for a long time. We won't. As soon as we can undo that, we will, and undo it meaning with custody. You have a smaller fund and you have wider spreads, and just be mindful of those things.
Yeah. No,
Doesn't
I think
make it bad, but just be mindful.
no, I think that well, okay. I would say keep an eye on it. Yeah, that makes sense. Let me see really quickly. Interesting question
Questions?
from Brain Dead, which is your personal on a personal side, what is your favorite state rule book? So talking about, cannabis states, they all have obviously their own individual patchwork rules and things like that. Who do you
Oof.
think is handling? I'm going to say Maryland. I feel like you got to go with your home state. One, two, they did a pretty good job. I feel like, right?
I'll have to make the sad confession. I'm not
What?
that educated enough to know all of the states' rules. Um, and to know which one's better. I do know enough to know how difficult it is for the companies to have, rules in this state that says, this label, or your store has to be this, or you can't have a vape, or percentages or things like that. Um, I know how difficult it is for those companies, but I'm not knowledgeable enough to say, oh, this state does that and that state does that. But I'm with you. Maryland seems, free and clear, seemingly no limitations. So I think there might be some when they turned on adult. I
Mhm.
don't know that they got everything that medical got. But don't hold me to that. But I thought there was some differences, and maybe it's been cleaned up now since then. But I thought there were some differences in the type, or maybe it's the amount or something of product you can buy. Um,
I'll have to
but
check, but I
but
think,
yeah, the
yeah,
Maryland's easy.
I also don't know exactly, obviously, all of the minutia between the different, states and things like that. But in terms of, I think, rollout and in terms of making everyone aware and kind of having a smooth and easy turn on and not having a lot of like complex things where you're kind of leaving gaps where you're saying it is, decriminalized, but there's no license. Like, I think some of the basic things, I think Maryland seems to have sidestepped. I think some of the
Yeah,
further states, I think ultimately. But
agreed.
anyhow, a lot out there. All right, let me look through the rest of the comments. I think those are pretty much yeah,
All right.
no.
Well, hopefully the answers helped.
Two final
But
things. So one, you were
mhm.
talking about volatility. It looks like broadly some of the well, no, dang it again. I was gonna say, speaking of the volatility, some of the cannabis
Well, let me
cohort
talk
has
about cash and where I think we are,
yes, that was
right?
okay.
And so I'll warn you now that I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow.
Okay. Should
Just
come
want
up.
to, in case anyone thought that I do know what's going to happen tomorrow, I have no clue what's going to happen tomorrow. But here's what I think. So one, I like a little bit of cash in the portfolio right now. And that can be ours or yours or mine, anyone's portfolio that's
Been
investing
mine.
in this category right now.
Yeah.
I love the news. I know things are coming, and I do believe that they are coming and will happen. But there's a lot going on, right? In fact, and I got to be careful about sharing rumors, right? Because that's the unfortunate thing that's happened over time. There's a lot of great rumors that are going on behind the scenes that people now don't share on X because when they share it, they get kicked in the groin again because they shared it and it didn't happen. And it's like, I heard it from this guy. What do you want me to do? I'm just sharing information, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's the unfortunate thing I've seen with X is that whole thing has really just completely died down. But I hear a lot, and so I'm under the impression, it's soonish, right? I've heard things like after this Alaska meeting, it could be coming, and Trump said, like, hey, within a few weeks, right? But that's a loose term.
Mm,
I think that one, it seems like, and hopefully for good reasons, the Russia Ukraine thing is going to take a little bit longer, right? It sounds like they're amenable to meetings and things like that. So I think that can delay some things. I just saw a headline that supposedly now the Epstein files are going to be released. Who knows what that means? I saw they just raided, John Bolton's house. Is it
yeah,
John
that's
something Bolton?
crazy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the mustache, right?
But it's crazy to raid anyone's house. Trump's house, Roger Stone's house. It's ridiculous. So unfortunately, they're getting what they gave, right, in that situation. So let the politicians have at it, right? So there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. So is it going to happen? I don't know. It might not. Is it going to happen within what I thought I was maybe hearing in the late August, September timeframe? I feel like it'll be longer. And then what we saw, not just what 3 days ago. Can you hear a lot of background noise?
Yes, a little bit. That's okay.
Hold on, I'm gonna text. Shut up.
Oh, no. It's only minor. It's all
Um,
good.
so I'm on vacation. I'm sorry. I'm on vacation.
Thanks for making the time to be here. It's good.
I'm
See,
never
good. All the
really on
back and forth.
vacation, right?
Whatever.
As
Yeah,
you
that is,
are as well, though, right? It's the nature of living in a small, working in a small business.
that's good.
Um, But as we saw like 3 days ago, these stocks, don't forget, they're microcap. And when the buying pressure goes away, they'll get killed. Now, it was awesome to see it come back. What do I think is going to happen between now and a real announcement? And I tweeted this the other day, more volatility. Is it maybe it's great to be mostly fully invested, but have some firepower? Absolutely. And for any kind of opportunity, just one, getting the news, two, changes that we'll see in the environment. Can you hear that
Yeah,
stream?
it sounds like a dog is in the background or something crazy. What's going on? What's the
Crazy,
setup?
crazy.
It's okay. Making
Um,
it work despite not volatility,
I
but there's
think
always stuff going on. That's
I
life,
think it's because it's my sister's kids are here and they're
Oh,
infants, and so they're probably entertaining them all. So sorry about that. Everyone's here in the background.
that's great. Again, thanks for giving the
Um,
time.
so to me,
Oh,
I like it. Dan could put the money to work if he wanted to today. We'll see how it goes. And
that's fair.
what and I'll end it with whatever Dan does, I want to beat the competitors.
That is fair. Either way, I think ultimately managing along the way to make it the best, smoothest experience possible. And Dan's
Mhm.
doing that work. So again, I know you've talked about it in a little more detail, which is great. I guess two final things that are more not more kind of like fun for the end, but uh I feel like we've seen a lot of news drop on Friday or on the weekend or anything like that. Are you worried about, getting a series of like drops or
Me?
ignoring it? Or yeah,
Lucy, what time is it? Am I worried? Yes.
okay,
I'm worried
whatever.
every freaking minute, it
Okay.
seems like. But no, not really. It's so headline driven. I'm not worried. If it's bad news, all right, they're going to go down. Prices are going to go down. If it's good news, we're what, 3%
Sure.
cash? We'll be
Yeah.
fine. And I would argue in the portfolio, if we get really good news, boy, we have some things that could have a real spring to them, right? So maybe that helps us as it relates to competitors. I don't know. We'll see. But that's what makes it fun. And we will keep doing this. We'll keep answering questions. I apologize, keep trying to clarify questions, not trying to evade questions.
No, it's
I
good.
won't tell you everything, right? I want to keep some business things that we do to myself, right? Obviously, if regulators require us to say it, we're going to say it, right? We're transparent every day with the holdings and things like that.
Mhm.
But as I said on the Dales report, right, we've been copied multiple times, whether it's using your other ETF to make that product more efficient, whether it was using swaps in the first place. I've even probably given away too much, of what we've been doing behind the scenes to manage, some of the swaps or our relationships with the swaps, to competitors. But we'll try to be really transparent. pretty accessible. I know that I even tweeted that I don't see everybody's questions because I've muted a few people. So, if you've said some pretty personal, offensive things about me or the company or
Sure.
people at the company, I don't know
Yeah.
that I care about the product so much. You can crap on that all you want. When you make it personal about people, I don't really want to see that in my feed, right? It just bums you out. So I just mute it, right? Some I've had to block. I only block people if they're prolific taggers in their posts,
Mm,
because then I don't want to see all the garbage takes, that those crazies put in there.
mm,
But again, in general, I'll try to be responsive to questions as much as I can. Keep in mind, X is just a microcosm of stuff. We talk to tons of people who love the space, love the product, continue to average in. I think, as I said on the Bales report, man, I can't wait till this really opens up from a custody perspective and more advisors can come in and more institutions come in. And I know, many of them aren't coming in through the product. We'll still be okay.
that is true. I guess that is true. But I think we are also doing the prep work to get that ready, when things do turn
Oh
on,
yeah,
to make sure that they understand how to
because there's that
of
gap, right, between the news
course,
and operational changes, right?
of course.
Dan and I and others in the company have been talking about that, right? We will see what we've seen, right? This big pop and there's the money, but we don't have the rules changed yet, right? So getting ourselves ready, and we're even closer to being ready. But we still have plenty of stuff that we could put to work if we wanted to, right? So I think that's the other thing to keep in mind. Do your own thing, do whatever makes you happy. You can tell what we are doing, right? So if we're going to leave money uninvested, we have a reason for it. There's plenty of stocks that we can buy if we want to, that fit the strategy and all of that. But we're going to sit where we sit for now.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Also, shout out to Mark. I can see one comment on Instagram. So he's saying, "Be smart, make it happen." Love that. I think that's a good one to do. All
Thanks,
right,
Mark.
appreciate you taking the time. I think it's great to continue to have the conversation, talk about it.
We'll be
Explain what you
back.
can. We'll be back, and we'll be talking about other stuff too. I know there's cannabis is obviously such a huge focus right now, just because Trump's comments and kind of the momentum we've seen around rescheduling and what could come after. But there are also some other good, interesting areas that we can talk about later.
And I was going to say, and you wanted to talk about them, but to try to keep us from having to pull this video so everyone can see it and we don't get people saying they pull the video, right? Um, Check out our website,
Check it out.
advisorshares.com. They're right there. Go check it out. There's some
Sure.
cool stuff out there.
Well,
Diversify yourself. We've got some small products that need some love, people.
that are
Get it?
doing
And they're good ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting themes. I think interesting. Yeah, we'll talk about it all. And also, again, shameless plug, but if you're watching this on any social media, if you're on Instagram, if you're on X or Twitter, I'm still in whatever. Definitely, I think if you want to see
Follow
some more stuff,
MP Advisor Shares on
you can
X.
you can follow me too. I need to get more of my
Don't say
tweeting.
mean things to her.
I have not been tweeting. I got to get in the mix. But anyhow, thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. Everyone, thanks for making the time. Hope you have a fantastic weekend and enjoy your time. All right. Thanks so much. We will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.